Hi, it's Dave and welcome back to Bass Blog. Today will be the final installment in unit number 1, Arpeggios triads. In the first 4 episodes, we discussed major, minor, and diminished triads. Today we're going to move on to conclude with the augmented triad. Like the diminished triad, the augmented chord is built on symmetrical intervals. In this case, major thirds, whereas the diminished was minor thirds. Augmented, it takes that same formula, but it just makes both the intervals major. And for that reason, there is a grouping and there is repetition. Let me demonstrate the augmented triad real quick and a couple of ways to play it. It's a more difficult fingering-wise and is probably a little less useful than a diminished triad, but still we need to know it because it will come up every so often. Usually not in the form of a triad, but obviously more often in like an augmented 6th chord, augmented 7th chord, lots of ways to color that chord. But let's start with the basics and start with the just playing the triad. The best way to finger, I think, the augmented triad is to start again in C, but at this time we're going to be in first position. 3rd finger, A string, the note C. The fingering is 3, jump a string up to 2, jump another string up, finger 1, like so. Now there's another way to play it which involves a shift, and sometimes it's a little more useful depending on where you are previously and where you're going. Again, now let's start in 3rd position, 1st finger on C. For this, you're going to have to make a leap. And in fact, it's a leap of 1 position. So the fingering is 1. You have to make a shift to land the 4-finger on this E natural, play up 1 string, play that G sharp with finger number 3. So let's watch it again. 1, shift 1 position, E, play 3 on the string above. Let's do that slowly. Here we go. Now, it would be a little remiss if it did not mention the fact that in that position, playing it that way, 1st finger indicates the name of the augmented triad. Now, there's another way to play it where we start on the E string and we can play actually the triad plus the octave. And it goes like this. It would start 1st position, 4th finger, E string, start on G sharp. And it would be 1 consecutive string rise for every finger, like this. Now again, that's not a triad, that's a triad plus the octave. But it's important to notice, you'll notice that finger 4 and finger 1 are playing an octave of one another. That's real important because, as in the diminished triad, there is repetition. In the diminished triad, remember, we had 3 groups of 4 notes. The augmented triad is a little bit different because what we have is, since it's major thirds, there's less room. So what we'll do is we'll get a repetition every 3 notes. So we'll play, for example, if we played A flat, C, E, A flat, you can see what we get. We get the repetition on the octaves right there. Now, the augmented pattern will repeat, whereas in the diminished triad we had 4 groups of 3, or 3 groups of 4. Here we have 4 groups of 3. So if we played the triad C, E, G sharp, The next one would be D flat, F, A, D, F sharp, A sharp, finally D sharp, G, B, D sharp, G, B. That's the last one there. And then we're back to E, and we're going to get that repetition again. E, G sharp, C, E, G sharp, C. So again, if you see a C augmented, it's the same thing as an E augmented. It's the same thing as a G sharp augmented. The only difference would be this, is if say for example the guitar player played E augmented on his guitar and you played C against that, well then I would perceive that to be a C augmented because of where the bass note is. The bass note usually indicates to me what that actual chord is. If the guitar player played G sharp augmented and you played E, it would fit very nice. The point again is like the last time, make those two match in the sense that if you can't remember one particular augmented chord, if you can remember the grouping, then you can get yourself out of a scrape every now and then. Now, as we have the fingering under our hands, we have to do, again, learn the names of the notes. So I would again start lowest to highest, and I would also be a little remiss if I did not mention that lowest to highest also means highest to lowest too. I mean, you can play both ways, and in fact a lot of times descending is a little more difficult. Sometimes like when you're walking down a real steep hill and you almost roll down the hill, it's so steep to walk down it's hard to do. It's sort of the same thing sometimes. But I know, for example, that if I want to play the C augmented triad, lowest to highest on my 4-string Fender bass, I can think already that my lowest note is going to be E, my highest note is going to be this C right there. So in other words, to play lowest to highest, those are my target ranges from here to right here. So let's go real slow. Let's play lowest to highest, highest to lowest, that little game. Let's play it, let's go slow, and let's work through those notes. So they would be this: G sharp, C, E, G sharp, C, E, G sharp, C, C, G sharp, E, C, G sharp, E, C, G sharp, E. There I played lowest to highest, the C augmented triad. Now we'd also want to go through and play, of course, all the other triads. Let's do the E augmented triad, and let's start lowest to highest. Now, although I played the C augmented triad lowest to highest and I started on E, on my 4-string Fender bass, the E augmented triad is also in the same way. The E is the lowest, C is the highest. Let's do that again, but this is where I'm going to start on E, and since it's symmetrical, it's really the same thing. E, G sharp, C, E, G sharp, C, E, G sharp, C. In fact, if you'll notice, I actually fingered that a little different. Always try to think of more than one way to finger your way out of an exercise. So again, get it under your fingers with the correct fingering, be able to move that around. Remember what I said in the beginning, you can also play the triad like this. That augmented triad falls anywhere. Or if we played 4 strings, we could play an augmented triad plus the octave. So forth and so forth and so on. So this is the end of unit number 1. If I'll be gone a couple weeks, I'm producing a CD for a lady that I work with, and I'm going to be busy with that for the next couple, 3 weeks. So I won't be able to probably do another blog. But when I come back, we'll come back with unit number 2, which will take those triads and we'll start adding color notes to them. 7th, 6s, augmented 6s, dominant 7th flats. And we'll just go crazy coloring all these triads that we've learned. We'll use the same principles, get the fingering under us, move it around, and then play lowest to highest.